Welcome, your backup plan tribe to this week's awesome podcast show with our interview today with Dr. Skip. And it's going to be amazing lessons from the tough guy wrestler. I think he's tough, and I know he's tough, and he's going to give us some great tips and tricks that he has learned through his journey and life changing events with him. That's what we're all about here. My name is Tina Ginn. Talking Taboo with Tina. Yes, we talk about taboo subjects on this show. Brought to you by your Backup Plan app. We focus on real, raw conversations with our listeners about their journey from a life changing event in their life. What is your Backup Plan app, anyways? Well, it puts your life all into one place in case of any unpredictable circumstance while taking that painful aftermath out of that tragedy. What does that mean, Tina? What the heck does that mean? One thing that we know is going to happen, and I hate to tell you guys, but we are going to die, or we're going to get sick, we're going to get disabled, we're going to get injured, we're going to have a disaster or a tragedy in our life at some point or time. And we have to be prepared for the unexpected because, in quotes, it won't happen to me is not the right frame of mind to be looking at life, because it will happen to you. We are not, it's all an illusion. We're not Superman, everybody, even though the movie is darn good. We live complicated lives, and we really need to be better prepared, like the pandemic that we're currently in and that we're all suffering desperately with. Wildfires, floods, freezing storms, hurricanes, the volcano that we currently had, the flooding that we currently had, the thefts that we endure sometimes, the condo collapse in Florida. We've experienced so many various things that we need to be better prepared for. Because if we're not, we're running around the house trying to escape a wildfire, trying to grab things that we are not ready for. We haven't taken photographs that you can log into the app. We haven't put down any receipts. We don't have the document box that we can grab. We're not prepared. All we do is we grab our coat, our animals, sometimes even not that, and we run out of the house. And thank goodness for 5-minute evacuations. I tell everybody every day that it is a blessing to have a 5-minute evacuation. We're not always given that opportunity, of course. So thank goodness for that. So let's make well use of that and be better prepared in the beginning. We're launching our emerging blueprint very soon. We'll bring you all to dig deeper into the why, what, and how. Why do you have these policies? What are they for? When do they end? What does it mean? Do I have too much? Do I have too little? All of that kind of stuff we do in the Emerging Blueprint program so that it coincides with the app when you log it all in. The how-tos, we have a library of videos that you can listen to 20 minutes sitting on the beach or in your garage or in the backyard in a hammock or in front of the TV set or a fireplace. It's easy, simple, and we have attorneys, lawyers, accountants, people in the insurance business, all giving great tips and tricks for everyone included. I am a best-selling author of In the Blink of an Eye because it happens that quickly. I'm a financial expert and app developer of Your Backup Plan app, and I'm right here in Vancouver, BC. I'd like to welcome all of you to our channel today. I'm super happy to have you here today. Thank you to our repeat visitors and how much I love you. Thank you so very much. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. I bring out my hand, and I always seem to get it wrong, but down here, subscribe button, guys, right down here, and click on that bell so you don't forget or don't miss a new broadcast. I'd like to welcome our United States and Canadian listeners, as well as our Irish, from Ireland, and our UK listeners, as well as our third highest, is Germany. Meine deutsche Freunde sind unserem Podcast willkommen. Wenn Sie Kommentar haben, können Sie gern Fragen stellen. Also danke für deine Freundschaft und danke fürs Erhören, meine deutsche Freunde. So thank you very, very much. Thank you to all the countries and all the wonderful people out there that do listen to our show. Thank you so very, very much. Let's get this party started with what our special guest today is all about. Lessons from the Tough Guy Wrestler. Let's bring him on and introduce. Here we go. I'm going to try your name. I'm really bad at it. I know, Dr. Skip Mondragon.
That's very close, Tina. Thank you. Almost. Mondragon is the Spanish pronunciation. Mondragon is the English pronunciation. But you gave it a valiant try.
In between try. Dr. Skip, we'll make it simple.
There you go.
It's a great title for you.
Or even Skip, whatever you're comfortable with, Tina. That's fine by me.
Awesome. Awesome. Your story is quite unbelievable. I'm excited to be inspired and motivated by you, Skip, today. Our show starts out with an interview with Colonel Skip, a 26-year-old Army veteran, a national wrestling champion. Skip is a transformed tough guy from his early on years. Since recovering from depression in 2014, he's been on a quest to help millions of men struggling with depression, one man at a time. Isn't that the truth? Men don't know how to cope with depression, and men don't know how to cope with grief, because I think it's from our early on years, I'm sure, of how we're brought up. But you're in a quest to change some of those things, and I'm looking forward to hearing about your book that you've written also for all our listeners. And where did it all start for you, Skip?
Would you clarify what the question is specific? Where did what start?
Where did your journey start? Where did you start with your book? Did it start with you starting back in when you were getting bullied in the younger years? or did you jump into it more from your experience as a doctor, do you think?
The book was a culmination of a lot of things. So the theme, let me go back to the theme in terms of, if you look there, wrestling depression is not for wimps. Lessons learned from an amateur wrestler's fight to triumph over depression. So the life lessons related to wrestling and how they apply to my struggle with depression, or the life lessons from wrestling as they apply to depression and my recovery from depression towards health and wellness.
Oh, cool.
There, I think I mentioned off camera earlier there that I began wrestling at the age of 13. I was mercilessly bullied as a child, the smallest kid in my class, moved a lot, so I was the new kid on the block, totally inept at any kind of sport. I was shy and awkward, not just physically, but socially, an easy target for bullies. Then I discovered wrestling in 8th grade. First time I ever had any success with a sport. Made the varsity team as an 8th grader. Actually didn't win a match for 2 years, but then when I began winning, I had a lot of success. 2-time district champion, state runner-up, won multiple state freestyle tournaments, which is one of the international styles, placed into national freestyle tournaments, graduated as an honorable mention All-American high school wrestler.
So you were really this golden nugget in the haystack, really, that you didn't know you had.
Yes, that's correct. And I was driven because I had been so bullied and was picked, like I say, bullied and pushed around, and I had something to prove. I realized as I got into my athletic career that I wasn't as strong, I wasn't as coordinated, I wasn't as fast. I didn't have all the athletic skills naturally that a lot of boys had.
Athletes.
Exactly. there that I wasn't as naturally endowed, but I wasn't going to be outworked. That they weren't going to outwork me. So the way I trained and the mentality that I trained with was that even on my worst day, I was going to be better than you when we stepped out on that mat. That was the mentality with which I trained.
And it's all up here and has nothing really to do with this.
Well, they go hand in hand, because if you don't train hard, then you can't bring out your best. Vince Lombardi said it, that fatigue makes cowards of us all. And so I've seen some great wrestlers out there when they begin to get tired, that, they huffing and puffing and can't bring their best, because then it hurts so bad that their opponent, who may not be as skilled but is better conditioned, now guess what? Now they can exploit that fatigue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They're always looking for that weakness.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So they go hand in hand. But if you can be the best trained, the most skilled, but if you don't have confidence, if you don't have this trained, guess what? You're going to get beat. There's a saying that if you think you can't, what? You can't.
Right. It's true, isn't it? Or like I say, Mike Tyson always says, if everyone has a plan until you get punched in the mouth.
Till that first punch, bam.
So much for that plan.
So that was the genesis of the idea and some of the lessons and so forth. But then when I suffered with depression, there was a perfect storm of things going on, 2013, 2014, as I was approaching the end of my Army career. And it culminated in the point where on April 17, 2014, I went to my office, and it was after a terrible night's sleep, because one of the major symptoms that I had was insomnia. And that I went to my office early. I always got there early, typically 45 minutes to an hour before anybody else. And I got there, empty hallway, going down the hallway to the Department of Medicine, unlocked my office, turned on the lights, stepped inside. And then everything then came crashing down upon me.
But lack of sleep has that tendency of doing that as well, right?
Well, it's a big contributor. So insomnia can contribute, but insomnia is also a major sign of depression. So disrupted sleep. So at that point, I felt beat up, beaten down, and broken.
What do you think was your first feeling that what am I doing here? What am I doing?
Well,
was that what you thought?
Well, at that point, I was overwhelmed. I turned off the lights, locked the door behind me, drew the blinds, turned off the phones, and I crawled under my desk in a fetal position. And for the next 4 hours, I was asking myself, Skip, what are you doing? Skip, how did you get here? You're a tough guy. You're a colonel. You spent 18 months in combat zones. You're a national wrestling champion. You
fought people.
You're
literally fought them.
Yes. Yeah. And so you're simultaneously, it's like I'm being this doctor patient, asking myself these questions and reflecting. Trauma is cumulative. You understand that. I think most people do. Childhood trauma, teenage trauma, trauma as you go through your life, and things I would see as a physician, an Army physician, treating dying and mangled soldiers, the disappointments in your own life as family members die and other things happen that you don't resolve. And then
you just keep pushing it in.
And all that accumulates. Then all these other factors that were going on this last year before that, now it just came crashing down upon me. Now, the mentality of a wrestler, is we gut it out. We have that saying, gut it out. The harder it gets, the harder you push. You just keep pushing through it. It's, well, that mentality is good in some respects, but it's this double-edged sword.
Yeah.
That you push, you push, you push. Well, guess what? The harder I push, the worse I got.
Yeah. Instead of looking at it and recognizing it to fix it, right?
Finally, after 4 hours of wrestling and being this like doctor patient, if you will, it's like bing, 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 bing. I'm putting all the pieces together. Oh, horrible blue mood, insomnia, impaired cognition, indecision, loss of confidence, worsening of the aches and pains from my osteoarthritis, impaired libido. My sex drive was like in the toilet. I had withdrawn from others. I lost pleasure in my passion. I had no interest in wrestling. That's one of my greatest passions in life. Coaching the kids, watching wrestling, following wrestling. No interest in that. They're interacting with people. Again, my world got smaller and smaller. It's like going through life in black and white. And when we talk about blue mood, it's not just feeling down. It's like this dark, heavy, palpable cloud descends upon you.
I call it a black room where there's no light.
Yeah.
And you walk around the room, and this is what I visualize to make it to be able to be pictured. But you're going around the room, touching the wall. Where's the window? Where's a door that I can open up to see some light? Where is it? Because it's just so black. It's so dark.
Yeah. And hope, is sucked out of you. It's a horrible place to be. Horrible place to be. But as I came to that realization and finally, Skip, you're depressed. Go get help. Now later, I would joke with people and say, if I'd only been my own doctor, I would have diagnosed myself so much sooner. Wait, I am a doctor.
Yeah, but you have to recognize it first.
But I went and got help that day and saw a clinical psychologist. They corroborated the diagnosis of major depression, and that set me on the road to recovery.
Awesome. Do they give you a plan of action? Is that what they do?
Well, they do. They set me up to start seeing another therapist who I worked with very closely, a gentleman by the name of Mike Perry. And Mike and I hit it off, Lieutenant Colonel Mike Perry. We had a lot of things in common. Both men committed our lives to Christ, so we're both Christians, family men, love our wives and our family. We had both been deployed. Just hit it off. There's heart connection there. So
a lot of similarities.
We call that in Spanish simpático, and that we would meet week by week, and he would give me these assignments, because I remember early on one of the sessions I was in, I remember sitting there with Mike, and I remember telling him, I expected to go out on a high note in my career and not go out on a whimper, because that's how beat down I was, that I felt like my career really hadn't amounted to much. And he had to bring me back to reality and say, no, sir, I don't think that's the case.
No, look at what you've achieved.
And so he had me do some assignments. Like he said, I want you to go and I want you to begin to write down some of your, major accomplishments at different points in your life. I want you to go and begin to document the lives that you've touched, those people in the Army that you've had an influence on, and began to address that reality that I had adopted that was wrong in my mind.
Right.
Because that's one of the things that depression does. It it makes you see things differently. You lose confidence, there, but it changes your perception of yourself. And these negative thoughts, that was one of the other things that I had, these negative thoughts that would just pound at me day and night. You don't deserve to be colonel. You let your department down. You let your family down. You're a fake. Who's going to want to hire you?
It's
And
this little guy on your shoulder. You just want to flick him, don't you?
because it's constantly there. Those thoughts just rolling around in your mind over and over. And then, of course, when are they worst? At
At
night,
night.
when you're laying there in the quiet of the night without any distractions, in the silence of the night, those thoughts just scream all the louder.
Absolutely. Did you see it? I'm sure in the military. I'm an Army brat, but did you see it as well with other military?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you did.
Mm-hmm.
PTSD and all of that kind of stuff is real.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Yeah. And we call those the invisible wounds of war. That,
Yeah.
It's easy to identify the men that came back with visible wounds of war, but there's far more that came back with the invisible wounds of war.
Yes. I found them difficult to incorporate themselves into real life again from that point.
And in many cases, that's correct.
So, what did you do when you were overseas? Were you?
Well, I'm a doctor, so I serve in that capacity. Taking care of soldiers, taking care. Now, in some cases, we treated civilians likewise, which is interesting because in Iraq during 2003, 2004, Operation Iraqi Freedom 1. I was up in Mosul in support of the 101st Airborne Division Air Assault. You can see that lovely airborne 101st
Your little
Airborne pin,
yeah
the Screaming
yeah
Eagles there. At that time, it was commanded by Major General David Petraeus. Major General was 2-star, so he was a 2-star general at the time. And amazing man, amazing staff. But we would sometimes treat the enemy combatants, and it was amazing for people that don't understand. Sometimes they bring in our casualties, and alongside them, they'd have these enemy combatants right alongside them. And when you triage patients, according to the Geneva Conventions and so forth, you triage according to the degree of their injury. So if that enemy combatant had the more severe injury, guess who went to the operating room first?
That's crazy.
And of course, trying to explain this to our young medics or to the young nurses who never seen this, or, why are they going there? It's because that's the way we do things, until you're trying to explain to them. Or you can imagine when you're talking or having to help a 18, 19, 20-year-old medic or a young nurse who's never experienced death of a patient, who has never treated somebody who's lost a limb, these type of things, that it's a difficult thing because you're having to deal with your own processing of that trauma.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you're
Helping
having
them.
to help them deal with that understanding that, okay, you've dealt with these situations before. They've never seen it. They've never had to deal with this before, and they're so much younger than you are and less equipped with their resources, their internal resources, to handle this. So
Yeah.
these are some of the situations that come up in that kind of combat zone. And that's apart from the fact of all the uncertainties when you're there. Are you going to mortar attack? Are you going to have a small arms attack on your hospital at any given time? Your family back home is worried about you, but you're on this heightened alert, all the time. Now, my last 3 months there, I was what was called the officer in charge of the hospital. my two senior colleagues left, and before they left, as they were preparing to leave, because they had to come back early to the States for some reasons there, they turned to me and said, "Skip, we think you should be the officer in charge of the hospital." Initially, I'm thinking, I don't think so. Now I was thinking to myself in more colorful language than that, mind you, but I was thinking, I don't think so, because what I was thinking, I know how to give great medical care. I understand how to do that well. I understand how to run a medical team. I don't know anything about logistics. I don't know anything about force protection. I don't know anything, how to manage air evacuation and all the different things that go into overseeing a combat support hospital. And that was the 21st Combat Support Hospital. And so initially talking with my wife and, over email and stuff, I'm saying, I don't know that I'm going to accept this, honey. And she said, I'll support you in whatever you decide. And then I'm back and forth with a senior colleague of mine who had commanded different hospitals. He was on my staff back at Fort Hood, a rheumatologist by the name of Dave Gifford. And he said, I think you need to rethink that, Skip, because he said, you're going to be promoted soon to 06 to colonel. I was a lieutenant colonel at that time, so I was going to be a full-blood colonel. And he said, when decisions are made at the table on post regarding the hospital, they need it represented by a colonel. So you need to rethink that. And I was praying about it, thinking about it, a lot. And the verse that came to mind was from the book of Esther, where Mordecai is coming to Esther, and a decree had went out, and the Jews were going to be exterminated on a given day due to a decree. And so Mordecai, her uncle, comes to her, and he says, Esther, who is now, the queen, there is, I want you to go and approach the king and plead for our nation. Well, if you hadn't been invited to come see the king, guess what? Death. And so she says, all right, pray and fast. And he said, we will. And she does, and all her handmaidens. And then she goes before the king. And her words are, if I perish, I perish. But Mordecai saying, but for such a time as this, you've been called, Esther. And that was the thought, the phrase, for such a time as this. So I accepted the position. And it turned out to be the highlight of my army.
Oh, nice. Where was it, Skip?
This is in Mosul, Iraq. So
where's Mosul?
Northern Iraq.
Oh, in northern Iraq. Okay. Were you ever located and posted in Germany?
No, I never was. No. So all 4 of my deployments were in the Middle East. Well,
okay.
3 out of the 4 were in the Middle East. So Operation Desert Shield, Desert Storm, Operation Iraqi Freedom 1, and then Operation Iraqi Freedom, Operation New Dawn. I was in Baghdad in 2010, 2011.
Egypt? No.
Nope. And then Haiti. So all these garden spots of the world.
And you know what? It's so crazy. When I went over to see my dad, who was stationed in Egypt for a little while, it's interesting how such beautiful countries they are, and there's so much hatred and fighting.
Yeah, and the Iraqi people per se, most of the Iraqis, lovely people. And most of them were grateful we were there. Obviously, there were those that didn't like us and weren't very happy we were there, but lovely people. And it was tragic to see what's happened to their nation.
Yes.
They are beautiful people, and, interacted with them at various times. And then again, the second time in a different role as an advisor, but just very lovely people. And feel so badly what has happened to their nation.
Yes, it has never gotten better. Just, you think it would, but it just doesn't. What do you think is a highlight of what you've done over there, that you helped someone? Was there anything that stands out in your mind?
Ooh.
That comes to you?
Well, let me go back to serving as the OIC, and then I'm going to come back to a story specifically there, Tina. So I reluctantly took that job, and I made 4 goals there when I took that job. And I'll step back just a moment and say, working with General Petraeus and his staff was amazing. What an amazing man! What an amazing staff! And I saw a different side of these warfighters, because I think of those of us in the medical profession, chaplains, social workers, all of us in the medical field as caretakers. But at the end of the day, I saw this side of these warfighters as caretakers. When they'd come in to see a soldier who had been injured or was ill, the empathy they would show. I
Yeah.
remember seeing in General Petraeus standing there at the bedside of a soldier who had been severely injured. You would see him in the ICU, gently stroking their head and talking to them and saying, calling them by name and saying, "You stay strong, your family needs you, and we need you." And you'd see this side of them, and to feel the pain that they would feel when you would have to tell them that, what's happened, their soldiers lost limbs or their soldier died, that you could feel that pain. And so, I saw this side that I'd never thought I'd see in terms
Hmm.
of these war fighters being caretakers. And General Petraeus would try to get there before one of his brigade commanders would get there to pin a Purple Heart on one of his soldiers. And if he got there, the rare occasion he got there before there, he's like, "Yes, I beat him," because he's so busy as the commanding general, and so his brigade commanders usually would get there, and so on that occasion he would. It's like, "Yes, I got there. I beat him here." But I set 4 goals when I was OIC. One was to ensure we gave excellent care to patients. 2 was to have a seamless transfer to the 67th cache who was going to replace us. 3 was to make sure our 220 personnel all returned home safely, and 4 was to glorify God. Well, we provided amazing medical care, and I'll share a story about that. A couple stories. 2, we had a seamless transfer with the 67th cache. It was amazing because we turned over the hospital before we left. 3, we did get all 220 of our personnel home, and when we did, and I got off that plane at Fort Hood, I felt like a 300-pound gorilla
Yeah.
fall off my back. And 4th, I felt in my heart when we arrived home that God had been glorified. So a couple things there. Had a buddy, Dave Ristet. He actually later was the commander of the 21st Cache, but he was came and joined us there. Dave was a major at the time, and we had worked together at Fort Hood, and actually we're in a Bible study together, and we're good friends, knew each other's families. And he had come over to join us, and I put him in charge of some things because I could trust Dave. So I put him over the lab, among some other things. He's a family practitioner, very very competent man, administratively and medically. Well, he and the lab officer, they made this SOP, standing operating procedure, for blood banking, particularly a walking blood bank. If
Oh.
push came to shove and we needed blood products that we couldn't get in, that we would then get soldiers there to give blood in a life-saving situation.
Right.
Well, we ended up having that scenario about 2 weeks later. I'd forgotten about this until Dave reminded me this at his retirement ceremony a couple of years ago. And we had this scenario. So a soldier came in, severely wounded, and was hemorrhaging to death. And so Dave, and we couldn't get the blood products in soon enough. So Dave went to the mess hall, and he's calling out, "Who has this blood type? Raise your hand. Let me see." He said, "All right, you come with me. You come with me. You come with me." Took him to the lab, quick cross and check there to verify, and they began to donate blood.
Oh, nice.
And we saved that soldier's life. So,
I wanted to make a point in saying from your story that people, well, our listeners have to remember that when this military person gets injured or their life is changed, this was their career. This is like a professional athlete who has worked hard at getting to a certain point, and then they get injured and their whole life is taken away from them.
mhm.
So people need to remember that it's not just, I have no left leg, so to speak. It's truly life changing in all aspects of their life.
Yeah, it's that whole identity has changed. I'm a soldier. I'm this individual that's part of this larger organization, and that's my identity. I'm a soldier.
Yeah.
And now, in most cases, I can no longer be a soldier. I can no longer be with my brothers and sisters. I can no longer do those things that a soldier does. And it's that ripping away of that identity and ripping away, if you will, from that uh, community of being out there with your brothers and sisters doing the thing that you may have wanted to do since the time you were a young kid, and
Yeah.
that you've trained, that you've given blood, sweat, and tears to do, that you
Yeah.
sacrificed to do.
And worked
And
hard
now,
towards.
yes, and now it's gone.
Mm.
With few exceptions. Now there are a few individuals, that are amputees and so forth that have come back on active duty. That's the rare exception that we know of,
Yeah.
that have been publicized. So yeah, it's a horrible thing to lose that, and so I appreciate you bringing that up, Tina. One other example I'd like to share, if I may, in terms of the quality of medicine that we offer. There was
Yeah.
a young, strapping soldier who came in. It was a beautiful September day, I remember. And it was one of the first days that we didn't have triple digits in temperature. That's one of the reasons I remember this day, how beautiful it was. And so we get this call. There's a mass call, mass cal. Everybody report to the EMT, the emergency medical tent. And at that time, our OIC, Colonel Tom Rosansky says, all right, gives us a quick briefing. We've got some severe injuries, some moderate injuries, some mild injuries. We don't know exactly how many, but everybody get to their teams, get them ready, get your tables. I managed one team, one table. And so we made sure everything was there. I had an anesthetist, and I think I had two, I can't remember, maybe three medics with me that we were as a team. And so I gave them each assignments. Okay, you're doing this, you're doing this, you're doing this, you're doing this as we get started. And so we had make sure we had our supplies, everything kind of lined up there, ready. We go out waiting for the ambulances. They begin to unload it. And as they're unloading it, they unload this stretcher with these strapping infantrymen, late 20s. And he has two large IVs in either what we call the antecubital fossa in the large veins here. Those are running, and they have the straps from the Humvee that he was riding in strapped around his thighs, his makeshift tourniquets. And meanwhile, his legs, because he's fighting and thrashing around, are flopping and flipping in all these places here because they're just hanging on by shreds. Because what had happened, they had just come back from R&R. They had been in the States and just gotten back from R&R, and they were convoying back to their forward base. And
Oh,
they were
okay.
and they were attacked by rocket-propelled grenades, RPGs, and small arm fire. And his Humvee got hit by a rocket-propelled grenade and nearly took off both legs. And if not for the fast action of the medics and his fellow soldiers there with those tourniquets and getting IVs in him, he would have never made it to our hospital. So these legs are just grotesquely flopping. I mean, up by his head, across his chest, and off the gurney. And he's, trying to sit up and fight against Squirrel, trying to keep him down. As soon as he gets off, Colonel Mondragon says, "That's your, he's yours, Skip." And so my team and I are getting him in, and I'm talking to him and saying, "We're going to take good care of you. I'm Dr. Mondragon. We're going to take good care of you. Look at his name, call him by name, carry him in, get him on the table." But we're trying to assess this man, but again, he's fighting and flailing. And I look to my nurse anesthetist, "Kate, what can you do to help me?" And so she quickly gives him 3 medication succession, intubates him, and we go to work. Can't feel a pulse.
Oh,
Can't feel a pulse. Can't measure an oxygen saturation. This man's in hemorrhagic shock. So we're running this fluid into him. We're calling to the lab saying, we're going to need, sending blood, and quickly saying, we're going to need blood for this man. Calling the OR, he's going to need to go to the OR, and then we're assessing him for other ends. You go through this protocol, specific protocol to assess, there. Okay, we know he's breathing there, but he's not getting enough circulation.
oxygen.
Yeah, and so forth, because he just doesn't have enough blood on board, and that's why we couldn't measure blood pressure and feel a pulse and so forth. But he is alive, but he's in extremis, and so we're assessing him. Thankfully, no chest wounds, no abdominal wounds, no other wounds. He's not bleeding, internally that we could assess. No other major wounds. We get him off to the operating room. He's getting blood. He's getting surgery. So he wakes up he's then in the ICU, and several hours later, he's coming to, and I go in to talk to him. And we're chatting, find out, he's married, has a young daughter and a baby on the way, and so forth. And then he says, "Doc, what about my legs?" And I said, "I'm sorry, Sarge, but one had to be amputated above the knee and the other below the knee." And he kind of looks at me. He looks at me and goes, "Well, yeah, that's what I thought." And I'm saying, "Well, what are you going to tell your wife?" And he said, "You tell her, honey, I got good news and I got bad news. The good news is I'm coming home. The bad news is they blew off my legs." Well, later, I'm there in the ICU, and I think it was his brigade commander came in, and he had a special phone that a secure line that he could call back home, and says, "Why don't you call your wife?" And I'm standing maybe 12 feet away in the ICU, and he dials up his wife and calls her, and they're chatting, and they says, "Honey, I got good news and I got bad news. The good news is I'm coming home. The bad news is they blew off my legs." And you hear this shriek on the other end. Wah! Wah! And he's here. He was on the brink of death hours before. Literally on the brink of death.
Yeah.
And
Minutes.
And he's telling her, "Honey, it's going to be okay. Honey, we're going to be okay."
Yeah.
The next day, we're loading him up, and a buddy of his there who had lost his hand in the same attack, right here at the wrist, his dominant hand. And as we're loading him up on the ambulance to go to the airfield, they're telling us, thank you for everything you do. Thank you so much." And we're feeling like, "Oh, gee, you guys are out there risking your lives," and so forth. Well, we lost track of them, hadn't heard what happened. They would go from there to Landstuhl Army Medical Center in Germany, and then from there typically to Walter Reed, and then sometimes on to Brooke Army Medical Center. Those were the main, points. But we lost sight of him. Didn't know what had happened until I got back, and we were flying back, and we had some soldiers from the 101st Airborne Division that we had to drop off at Fort Bragg. And so we get there, and I'm sorry, not Fort Campbell, not Fort Bragg, but Fort Campbell. And so we land, and of course, when does the Army land? It's in the middle of the night. And I think we land there, must have been about 2 in the morning. But who's there to greet us? Mrs. Petraeus and some other ladies from the 101st, wives from the 101st. And so they're greeting us and providing snacks, and they had some cots that people wanted to rest and so forth. But she took me aside as the OIC and is chatting with me and saying, "Do you remember Sergeant Kellner?" And I said, "Yes, I do. Of course I do." And she said, "Well, last week he was standing out on the tarmac in his prostheses to welcome his buddies home." And when she said that, my heart sang.
Yeah.
Because I knew this man was going to be fine. And later, find out that he became an advocate for injured soldiers, for amputees in particular. He went on as a Paralympian and was a Olympic silver medalist, and
Nice.
has done some great things. So you realize that's the kind of medicine that we deliver in a combat zone.
Right. In
Those
real
are the
life.
kind of things that we do world class,
Yeah.
that we are capable of doing in that situation. But those are 2 of the stories, and I could tell many more,
Yeah.
but
That's
those are
amazing.
2 that stick out in my mind. But speaks to that resiliency and that toughness of that soldier mindset, but
Yes.
also to the ingenuity and the amazing care that is rendered by Army medicine.
And I do realize that a lot of us go through certain things and it's difficult, but at the same time, it teaches us lessons and it teaches us how to help heal others as
Mhm.
well.
Right.
Like all the work that you're doing from everything you've been through. But my one question I have to you is, we've lost a lot of celebrities as well for this depression. Robin Williams, and there's many, many of them. Um, and some of them are comedians just like that, and
Sure.
some of them have
Mhm.
high stressful jobs like you.
Mhm.
What you're such good actors. You're
Mm.
hiding it so well from everyone, including wives sometimes.
Mhm.
You wonder, how is that even possible? How, how does that get hidden so well?
I think part of that is that mentality of men, and you alluded to it a little bit earlier, that there, and I don't know if it's off camera or on, but the way we've been raised, don't be a crybaby, don't be a sissy, be a man. Real men don't cry. And as men, we have learned, we push our feelings down so much that we're out of touch with them. And actually, there was a term coined by a famous psychologist who's well known in psychological circles, former president of the American Psychological Association, Dr. Ronald Levant. He coined the term normative male alexithymia. And alexithymia means feelings without words. So we lose contact with what we're feeling. We don't know how to express what we're feeling. We don't know what we're feeling, much less the ability to express it and share it with somebody.
Right.
So it's almost like being dwarfed, if you will, in our emotional range. And so as men, we may grow up with this idea that sharing and not knowing how to share tender feelings because it's been bred out of us, it's been conditioned out of us to express tears, to express openly express sadness, to admit I'm confused,
Sad.
I'm sad, I'm hurt. I feel shame, I feel guilt. Uh,
Yeah.
these range of what we would call negative emotions, we don't learn how to express them. And so we have this blunted range where it might be that I can express at least some aspects of love. I can express elation. Yeah, team, go, go. I can express anger. And so much of these other emotions are expressed as anger rather than I'm hurt, I'm sad, I'm shameful,
I'm
I'm
grieving.
confused, or I'm fearful. Yes,
Yeah.
get expressed as anger when in fact it's these other things, but we don't know how to express them. And so we get in trouble as men with that because it gets turned inward
Yeah.
and we hide it and we don't open up, and it eats at us. And then because we're unwilling or don't know how to reach out, both cases, because there's many studies that show men won't go to the doctor nearly as often as women for problems, and certainly won't go see mental health for mental health issues. They self-medicate on many levels.
Addictions.
Yeah, gambling, risky behaviors, other things that they'll get into to self-medicate, pornography. So
Drugs.
many maladaptive behaviors that they get involved with to
To
their
make that
detriment.
feeling go away.
Right. I need to plug in my computer. I just saw it. Bear with me a moment.
Just saw the
Thought it.
time coming up.
I just saw that it was blinking a little bit there. It's like, oh, I don't want to suddenly go black here.
Yeah.
So I was saying that with all that, it can get turned inward, and then we feel isolated, and then we begin to experience this sadness that I talked about, these negative thoughts, and lose our confidence, become more indecisive, and a myriad of other symptoms that can happen, and
Yeah.
now lose hope because you're in such a dark place and you feel all alone. And then the suicidal thoughts may happen. And if you don't seek help, those can run their course. And unfortunately, with too many, they do. And I tell others, one life is too many.
Yeah.
But that's what we can see with this. And certainly depression can contribute to suicide. And certainly in some of our younger age groups, untreated depression is the major leading cause of suicide in some of our younger folks. And so, and suicide in our younger age groups, the 10 to 14 and
Yeah.
14 to 24, is typically the second leading cause of death in
Is
those age groups.
overdosing kind of part of that too?
If
You
it's
think?
intentional. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And in females, that's the most common way they attempt suicide or complete suicide.
Yeah.
Or I should say, die by suicide
Yeah.
is is by substances, typically pills.
Right.
Yeah.
What would you suggest for someone listening right now that knows someone or is going through some of those feelings that you just talked about?
Is
Do they reach out? Is that the best thing to
Yeah,
do?
no,
Is
no, absolutely. Reach out and understand that raising the issue of suicide is not going to put him at a higher risk for suicide. If you're concerned, ask them, are you considering harming yourself? Let them know, I love you. I'm concerned about you. Seeing changes in their lives. If you feel they're depressed, I've seen changes in you. I'm concerned. Would you like to talk about and don't feel reluctant to raise that. If somebody were stepping out in front of a car, wouldn't you try to grab them back and protect them?
Mm-hmm.
So don't ever be reluctant to ask that person or share with that person in love and compassion. I'm concerned about you. I've seen some changes in your life.
But not be judgmental.
Absolutely. Never be judgmental where they're at, but do it out of concern and listen and listen and say, if you'd like to seek help, I'm happy to go with you. I'm happy to take you there. And if they are, if suicide, a suicide attempt is impending, then call 911. Because people really don't want to die by suicide.
Right.
Suicide, individuals who attempted suicide and are survivors, they'll tell you, I really didn't want to die. Those who have gone off, the Golden Gate Bridge or some of these other ways they've attempted it and survived,
Yeah.
they'll say, I'm glad I didn't die. I really didn't want to die, but I didn't see any other way out to end the pain, because that's what it is. They're in such pain. They want the pain to end. So never be reluctant to reach out.
Mm-hmm.
Never be reluctant to reach out and listen. And I tell people we have to listen with our eyes, our ears,
In our heart.
and our hearts.
And be present.
And you can't listen like that unless you are present.
That's right. It's hard for people, though. It's hard to be present.
Yes, indeed it is, because we are so distractible.
Mm-hmm.
And what's the biggest distractor?
Yeah.
Right here, the rings, the dings, and the pings. Right here.
That's right. Because when someone's on their deathbed, you have to shut all of that noise and clutter and everything out as well, right? Otherwise, you're not there to experience that moment. You were talking about earlier about what you've gone through with some of the military men and trying to explain to the wives that your military husband won't be coming home or is injured or that type of thing. What did you experience with that? You were mentioning about the Asian wives and how they
yeah,
didn't look
we were
after
talking.
anything.
Yeah, we were talking earlier off camera that husbands who perhaps had married, let's say, a wife from Korea. English may have been her second language. She may not be totally
Or
familiar with
Mexico
American,
or
yeah,
anyway, really.
someplace else,
Yeah.
totally familiar with American culture. He goes off to war, may or may not come home, but he's off, he's gone, and now he managed everything. Paying all the bills, managing all the finances, doing everything, and then leaves without giving her a detailed plan. This is how everything is going. This is where, to pay the bills, how to pay the bills, how to manage the checkbook, et cetera, et cetera. And then, so paychecks coming in, and she doesn't know how to manage things. And plus, there may be additional pay. Typically, if you're in a war zone or in a hardship zone, you are getting additional pay when you're in these places. So she's seeing not just pay, but extra pay now. And so she may see that and think, ooh, I got all this coming in. Yahoo! I can go on a shopping spree. And may not understand, oh, rent, groceries, utilities, car payment, other payments, and, on it goes. And then the bills start coming in. Oh my gosh. And then maybe she gets a call from her husband. Well, did you take care of this and this and this? And, now there's that conflict and so forth. I didn't know about it. Why didn't you know about it? You didn't tell me. We've seen these problems. But now to speak to the idea of telling somebody, your husband's been severely injured or your husband died. Well, anytime you have to tell somebody about a tragedy like that. As a physician, it's like a little part of you dies.
It's like gut wrenching.
It's it takes a little bit out of you each and every time. There's no doubt about it.
I know.
That's what comes with the territory.
It must be hard
They
during the
tell you
pandemic, though.
they tell you you have to be objective and so forth. But yes and no. You do your best in the moment to um, make those clinical decisions as best you can, but we also make decisions from the heart, and you can't help but love your patients because medicine is as much an art as it is a science. And I treat patients. I tell them I treat patients, and that's what I would tell my residents. We take patients. We treat people. It's not a disease. You're treating this illness packaged in a person,
Hmm.
and that person
Has
has
feelings.
has a body, mind, and spirit. And so we have to deal with that person. We can't just say it's like a disease. And
Yeah.
so and it takes it out of you.
Hmm.
It takes it out of you, and you can imagine the toll it's been taking on our medical personnel over this past 2 years. It has
Yes.
taken a heavy, heavy toll. And then you look at it, the number of medical personnel. It's into the tens of thousands. The
Yes.
number of medical personnel who have lost their lives during this pandemic. So it's at a
Yes.
great sacrifice. I have my second youngest son. We have 5 children, 4 boys and a girl, and my second youngest is a physician, ER physician. He and his wife are both physicians. So the physicians, the doctors Mondragon, I call them. She's internal medicine now, training to be a geriatrician, and they finished their residencies in June and are in Houston now. Um, but we didn't get to see them much. We had
Yeah.
anticipated, because they're a couple hours away, that we were going to see them a lot more after their medical school. Well, guess what? We hardly got to see them at all. Not just because of their training, but because of COVID. And
Yeah.
and but they're exposed, regularly. So we're always praying for them and so forth. They're fully vaccinated, been boosted, and so forth, but and take precautions. But it's always in the back of our minds.
Yes.
Our kids are out there uh, taking care of these patients day in and day out. And
Absolutely.
stories my son tells, because he's an ER doc, it's tragic. Some of the things he'll say, and Dad, he says, the worst is the patients who aren't vaccinated. That's what I'm seeing, Dad. But enough said there.
Yeah.
But the
Yeah. No, it must be
toll, and
hard.
he talks about it, with his colleagues and others, and I hear it from others of mine. I'm
Yeah.
retired in medicine. I still do some practicing in a limited way, but I'm
Hmm.
not out there on the front lines like I was
Yeah.
before.
Yeah. Oh, Skip, that's awesome. What do you think you'd have a final message for people? I mean, you've seen so much.
Yeah. Final message. Thank you,
Yes.
Tina.
Well, bring out your book. Bring out your
Oh,
book
bring out
first.
my book. Okay. Wrestling depression is not for wimps. Lessons learned from an amateur fight to triumph over depression. And you can see my
So,
little book award there that I got
y-
there. So as a gold award with the
yeah, that it comes up in the
independent.
camera well.
Uh,
Would you advise that book for grief, people dealing with grief as well?
uh,
Because it is
yes,
kind of a depression. It's
yes, yeah. Because there are many of the same things you go through in depression as you go through with grief. Absolutely, that it would
yeah,
apply. That simple, practical steps that could help you as you recover. No doubt about it.
awesome. And everybody, the description is down below for that as well.
Thank you.
So,
I did
yeah.
want to mention before I forget that I recently gave a TEDx talk. It was just released a couple days ago. It's entitled Tough Guys Are an Endangered Species. And it details more about my story and the difficulties men get into from not identifying, expressing, and sharing their feelings. That's a way to hear more about my story also.
I'll
If
make
you
sure I have it in the description box
and
for people.
I would make a request with that if I may. If you go watch it, tell me, like it, and leave a comment. What resonates most with you, and share it with somebody that you know needs to hear that message.
Hmm.
Because men, especially tough guys, need to hear that message.
Yes.
But final thoughts. If you are in that dark place,
Or know someone.
don't stay there. You don't have to stay there. Remember this, you're never, ever, ever truly alone. You may feel like it, but you're never, ever truly alone. Don't suffer in silence one more day. Please go get help. And let me leave you with this prescription. I have written this prescription for thousands and thousands of patients. And I tell them, you will have no bad side effects from this medicine. It has absolutely no drug to drug interactions. And you cannot overdose on it. Proverbs 17:22 says, a merry heart doeth good like a medicine, but a broken spirit drieth up the bones. So today and each and every day, I want you to take a liberal dose of laughter. Dr. Skip Mondragon's prescription to you is to laugh and laugh heartily each and every day. It's good medicine.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, from your point, where do they reach out when you're in that world and you come to the conclusion that you want to reach out? How do you know where to?
I think the easiest place to reach out to, if you are an extremist, you go to the nearest ER, or you call 911, or you call your primary care doctor.
Oh, okay. And
And if
reveal it
not,
to them.
right, if you're struggling with there, I can give you a phone number, the uh, National Suicide Prevention Hotline, and that is 800 273 8255. If you are a veteran or military, it's 800 273 8255, the same number, and then
Push.
push one afterwards. And that will get you to the appropriate military line to speak with counselors 24/7. They are
Perfect.
available at that National Suicide Prevention Hotline.
Awesome. And I mean, we didn't talk about people that you saw that weren't prepared, but I'm sure each and every one really wasn't. And
There are so
we,
many things, Tina. You'll have to have me back so we can talk
I
about
I
preparedness.
will. Skip is gonna be back. There's so many things that you've seen and done and helped people with. You should be so proud.
Thank
Truly,
you. Thank you.
you've been an awesome guest. So thank you so much for coming on, Skip. I loved your stories and your honesty and truthfulness of what you've been through.
Thank you, Tina.
Yes. So please take a moment and subscribe to our channel. You know, I'm going to get my hand out again. Down here, down here below, subscribe button. If you have been watching our show, listeners, you are here for a reason. Please like, share, and subscribe. I will include Dr. Skip's TED Talk as well down below and his book link as well, so that you have all that information easily at your fingertips. Stay tuned for our next podcast and live streams. I have great conversations with some of the most accomplished people in the world, just like Skip here. I think you'll be entertained, informed, and hope that we've
Mm,
inspired you and motivated you to start thinking about your unique plan,
mm,
maybe
mm,
thinking about who you might know today in your mind
mm,
that's going through something or possibly
mm, mm,
going
mm.
through something that Skip has talked about. And I think you should reach out because, when you're thinking about that someone special today and you haven't talked to them, and
Mhm.
you should call them. We still
That's
have
right.
phones. We have Zoom and FaceTime and all sorts of things for you to
Yes.
reach out to that person
Mhm.
today and tell them how much you love and care about,
Yes.
because you do not know what tomorrow may bring.
That's right.
So, thank you all to our listeners. We are now into our second season of our show, and we want to thank all of you for coming back. We are on all podcast platforms: YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter,
Mhm.
TikTok, and Facebook. That's getting to be quite the mouthful these days. So, thank you for sharing your time with us. I love each and every one of you. And I think Dr. Skip knows that I always end with Carol Burnett. And I know you know who Carol Burnett is. I think she's from Texas, isn't she?
I think you may be right.
I
I
think so.
believe so.
I think she is. I'm so glad we had this time together just to have a laugh or sing a song. Seems we just get started, and before you know it, comes the time we have to say so long. So long, everybody. Stay safe, be kind, expect the unexpected.
Hmm.
Sending lots of love.
Adios.
Bye bye, everybody. Thank you for coming.